Take a breath before you continue reading, because what you're about to hear isn't something your mind invented and it didn't find you by accident. The person who just surfaced in your thoughts, the one who appeared without you calling them, is there for a reason that goes deeper than coincidence. There is a connection between you and this person that neither of you has been able to fully put into words. And no matter how many times either of you has tried to rationalize it, minimize it, or simply move past it, it hasn't gone anywhere. It stays. It holds its ground quietly and steadily beneath everything else. This person feels drawn to you in a way that is both powerful and carefully contained, a kind of feeling they have never quite let themselves experience before, at least not like this. And yet something keeps the two of you apart. Something makes the whole situation feel like it exists just outside the boundary of what is permitted. Understanding why that is, really understanding it, will completely change the way you interpret every thought, every moment, every feeling connected to this person. Even across distance, even through silence, someone out there is consumed by thoughts of you. But this connection cannot move freely forward. There are two important truths underneath all of this, and both of them matter deeply. First, let this settle in. When a bond feels restricted or forbidden, that says nothing about weakness. It often points to the opposite. Connections like this don't begin in comfortable, easy circumstances. They don't rise out of boredom or surface-level attraction. They aren't born from loneliness looking for any available warmth. These bonds begin somewhere far deeper, in a place where both people recognize something in the other that speaks directly to their inner world, something that bypasses the ordinary filters. This person didn't decide to develop these feelings for you through a conscious choice. They didn't sit down one day and decide you would become the person they couldn't stop thinking about. It happened slowly, almost without them noticing, and then all at once it was undeniable. At first you were simply someone they became aware of. Then you became someone they respected, then someone they trusted in a way they don't trust easily. And somewhere in that quiet progression, without any clear moment they could point to, you became the person their mind returns to without permission. What makes it feel forbidden isn't the absence of genuine feeling. The feeling is very much there. What stands in the way is everything surrounding it. The timing, the obligations they already carry. The internal rules they've followed for so long they've become part of their identity. The commitments they made when they were a different version of themselves. The expectations placed on them by family, culture, or their own deeply held sense of what is right. Sometimes one of you simply isn't free in a way that makes moving forward straightforward. Sometimes this connection doesn't just complicate their situation. It calls into question everything they thought they were building toward. And so, instead of moving closer, they hold themselves in place. Instead of saying what they feel, they go quiet. Instead of reaching out, they watch from a careful distance. They contain everything. Here is something that often gets missed entirely. Silence is not the same as indifference. In fact, when the emotions involved are intense enough, silence becomes the only thing that feels manageable. This person is not calm where you are concerned. Their feelings run strong and deep, but the very intensity of it is what keeps them quiet. If they spoke, they would open a door they don't know how to close. If they moved closer, they would have to face consequences they aren't ready to face. If they allowed themselves full honesty, things hidden even from themselves would have to come to the surface. There is a truth that runs through human nature. The harder we try to suppress something, the more insistently it grows. Every time this person stops themselves from reaching out to you, the pull toward you increases. Every act of self-restraint tightens the connection rather than loosening it. Every time they push the feelings back down, those feelings don't disappear. They go deeper, they become more rooted. Suppressed emotions don't dissolve with time. They wait, they strengthen, they find other ways to make themselves known. This explains the strange quality of energy you sometimes sense between you. It explains why you feel their presence even when they aren't near. It explains why thoughts of them arrive uninvited and without any obvious trigger. It explains those shifts in your mood that seem to come from nowhere in particular. You may feel a kind of unfinished current running between you that never fully settles. That's because what's between you hasn't been resolved. It lives in a middle space, not gone, not fully here, carrying all its weight just beneath the surface. This person holds you in their private thoughts, while presenting an entirely calm exterior to the world around them. From the outside, they look settled, stable, unaffected. But inside, there is a constant pull in two directions. Desire moves in, and then self-discipline immediately pulls it back. They exist in that tension daily. You matter to them more than they can comfortably manage. That is the actual problem. Not that you matter too little, but that you matter in a way that threatens the structure of the life they've carefully arranged. They worry about the disruption, about going against values they built their sense of self on, about beginning something they might not be able to step back from. That internal struggle costs them real energy. It's why the connection carries a heaviness even without regular contact. It's why distance between you doesn't actually bring either of you peace. You have both been changed by knowing each other, whether or not that change has been fully acknowledged out loud. Something in each of you has shifted direction. That is not imagined. That is not wishful thinking. That is a real bond operating on a level that doesn't answer to ordinary logic or convenient timing. There are no strategies in play between you. No games. No one is engineering tension for effect. There are simply two people who encountered something they weren't expecting and haven't yet figured out how to place it within the lives they're already living. And as that reality settles in, one thing becomes clear. You are not a passing distraction in this person's world. You are not interchangeable with someone else. You are not a mistake. You are part of a story that has already begun moving both of you toward a more honest version of yourselves, whether or not either of you chose that consciously. If you've stayed with this until now, you're part of a smaller group of people willing to look honestly at something most people spend their whole lives stepping around. Most people feel things like this and then immediately look for ways to explain them away, because sitting with that level of feeling is genuinely difficult. But what you're encountering here isn't just a description of a complicated attraction. It's something that has the potential to change permanently how you understand your own emotional world. This kind of connection doesn't weaken with distance the way ordinary attraction does. It doesn't fade simply because it's inconvenient. It follows both of you quietly, like something unfinished that hasn't yet found its resolution. Even when this person is fully occupied with their daily life, their work, their family, their responsibilities, the mind has a way of returning to what it hasn't been able to settle. They remember how it felt to be genuinely understood by you without having to explain themselves. They remember how naturally they could simply be themselves in your presence. They remember specific moments that landed with more weight than they expected. And once someone has felt truly seen at that level, there is no clean way to undo it. A lot of people make the mistake of interpreting distance as diminished feeling, but that's often exactly wrong. The distance sometimes exists because the feeling is too much, not too little. This person knows that closing even a small part of the gap between you could make turning back impossible. They sense that full honesty would lead somewhere permanent, and so they choose the familiar structure over the intensity of what they actually feel. They choose the discomfort they already know over a truth they haven't yet decided how to handle. But that choice has a real internal cost. Every time they suppress what they genuinely feel, it doesn't dissolve. It transforms. It resurfaces as restlessness, as a low-level sense of disconnection from the life they're outwardly living, as a vague awareness that something important is absent, something they can feel the shape of but can't quite name. They may find themselves questioning relationships that used to feel solid, wondering why things that once satisfied them no longer fully do. You have quietly become an internal reference point for them of what real emotional authenticity feels like. And that is difficult to unknow. This is exactly why the connection never quite feels finished. It isn't only about two people missing each other in a straightforward way. It is about two lives standing at the edge of a significant internal change. And you can feel this in yourself too. Since this person entered your life, what you're willing to accept in relationships has quietly shifted. You have less tolerance for surface-level connection. You understand from the inside what genuine resonance feels like. You know the difference now between something that checks the expected boxes and something that actually means something. This bond is not primarily about wanting a specific person. It's about waking up to what is real inside yourself. Some connections are designed to build a shared life. Others exist to illuminate something you couldn't have found another way. This one clearly belongs in that second category. You met each other at a moment when something in you was already beginning to stir. They came into your life at a time when they were quietly questioning the life they'd built. You became mirrors for each other, each reflecting back to the other something that needed to come into the light. This kind of connection doesn't follow ordinary schedules or rush itself. It works at its own pace, slowly reshaping what you value, what feels meaningful, what you understand as real. The silence between you is charged with something that hasn't yet been spoken. You may have asked yourself why letting go of this feels impossible, even when your rational mind lists all the reasons why you should. Why understanding that nothing can happen doesn't actually make it stop mattering. Why telling yourself the practical truth of the situation doesn't bring the freedom it should. It's because this bond is attached to an emotional experience that genuinely changed you. A real emotional truth once felt at that depth doesn't respond well to logical arguments. You are not just holding on to a person. You are holding on to something that altered who you are and how you understand yourself. This doesn't mean your life should go on pause for an uncertain future. It doesn't mean you should stop living in the present or put everything meaningful aside in a holding pattern of waiting. What it means is that there is something this connection is actively teaching you right now, in this moment. It is showing you the actual depth your heart is capable of. It is revealing the kind of connection that adds to your energy rather than draining it. It is reminding you that genuine feeling doesn't always stay within the boundaries of what's safe or comfortable. What comes next between you cannot be manufactured or rushed into being. It will open only when honesty becomes stronger than fear on both sides. Until that happens, it stays exactly where it is right now, suspended, neither finished nor fully present. It lives in thoughts and in quiet moments when truth gets through the noise. As time passes, the internal tension for this person between who they have been and who they are in the process of becoming will keep intensifying. The same is true for you. A mind that has woken up doesn't simply go back to how things were before. Readiness tends to arrive not in a single clear moment, but through an accumulation of quiet discomfort and the slow, undeniable sense that something no longer fits the life it's been living in. For this person, it often begins as small internal fractures. Roles they've accepted start to feel more constraining than they used to. Duties they once carried without question begin to feel like walls. Emotional habits that used to feel natural start feeling hollow. Even when everything looks fine from the outside, there is a growing internal misalignment. You didn't create that. You simply shone a light on something that was already present and waiting to be acknowledged. You didn't fracture anything that was truly whole. You revealed where the cracks were already forming. That is part of why you feel significant to them in a way that goes beyond ordinary attraction. You represent an honest question about the life they've been building, a question they can't quite silence. And lives that are held together by carefully maintained comfort rather than real truth tend to resist that kind of question with everything available. People in that position convince themselves it's a temporary phase that will pass if they wait long enough. They tell themselves that if they avoid it firmly enough, it will lose its power. But that's not how deep connections work. They don't weaken under avoidance. They build pressure until something gives. This is what explains the pattern of warmth followed by sudden withdrawal that you may have noticed. That back and forth isn't confusion about you specifically. It's the visible surface of an internal battle. They are standing between who they have been and the person they are slowly and quietly becoming. And you represent that same kind of threshold for your own growth. While this is happening in them, something is happening in you too. You're developing a new kind of clarity. You are learning to distinguish between feelings that are simply intense and feelings that carry real lasting meaning. You are learning to tell the difference between surface-level connection and something that actually aligns with who you are. This connection arrived not to consume your days, but to illuminate your inner world. Things that used to hold your attention at a superficial level no longer move you the same way. You feel less urgency to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You are discovering that you no longer need external validation to confirm your own worth. This bond is quietly teaching you how to honor yourself without requiring an audience. It has given you a felt understanding of what real emotional resonance is. And once you've experienced being truly known at that level, you cannot go back to pretending it doesn't matter. This is what makes the connection feel singular. It carries genuine meaning regardless of what its final form turns out to be. Whether it grows into something shared and lasting, or whether it remains unfinished, it has already done profound work. It has expanded your emotional capacity. It has sharpened your instincts. It has made unmistakably clear what actually matters to you in a close relationship. And that is why neither of you can simply set it down and walk away without any lasting effect. The timing may feel frustratingly wrong right now, but timing often functions as preparation rather than punishment. Some people meet before they're ready for what the meeting requires, before the internal changes needed to sustain something real have had time to happen. Without that deeper work, even powerful connections can collapse under unhealed fears and old, unexamined patterns. Right now, both of you are being called to look beyond simply wanting each other. You're being asked to look honestly at what lives inside yourselves. For this person, the central question is whether they can choose full honesty, even when it demands something real from them. For you, the question is whether you can fully value yourself, even when the waiting is genuinely painful. This is why real patience matters here. Not the passive kind of waiting that is built only on hope and slowly hollows you out, but the kind of patience grounded in trusting your own unfolding, in continuing to grow and build your life and make choices that align with who you actually are. You are meant to keep living, making decisions, becoming. If this connection is meant to become something shared and lasting, it will happen when both of you are able to meet each other openly and without holding back. And even if it never becomes that, its effect remains. Because it has already shifted your internal direction in ways that matter. Many people move through their entire lives without ever encountering a connection that truly wakes something up inside them. They settle into relationships that feel safe but somehow not quite full. You didn't do that. You encountered something real enough to disrupt old patterns and call for genuine growth. As time continues, clarity will come, not by forcing it, but by living with honesty and acting with real integrity. People either grow toward their own truth or they retreat into what feels familiar. Either way, the answer reveals itself. Until full clarity arrives, trust what this connection has already given you. It has brought you a new level of self-awareness, and real awareness, once it wakes up inside a person, doesn't allow things to stay exactly as they were. You stop trying to force this into a neat category or demand explanations for every piece of it. Instead, you listen to what it's stirring inside your own self. That is where your real strength lives. The genuine risk in something this complicated is losing yourself in the attempt to figure it all out. But that's not what's happening anymore. You are noticing how much steadier you feel when you make yourself the priority. You are seeing how much cleaner everything looks when you stop scanning for every possible signal. You are learning that this connection, whatever shape it takes, is not something that should cost you who you are. Real depth does not ask you to abandon yourself in order to maintain connection. It does not demand that you constantly prove your worth through exhaustion, anxiety, overthinking, or emotional self-erasure. One of the most important realizations you are beginning to absorb is that genuine connection does not require you to disappear inside someone else's uncertainty. It does not reward confusion. It does not become more meaningful simply because it is difficult to hold. Pain can exist inside love, but pain itself is not proof of love. That distinction changes everything once it truly settles into the nervous system. For a long time, many people unconsciously associate intensity with truth. They assume that if something consumes their thoughts, disrupts their sleep, shakes their emotions, or creates endless internal conflict, then it must automatically be significant. But intensity and alignment are not the same thing. Sometimes intensity is simply the nervous system reacting to inconsistency, unpredictability, or emotional deprivation. Real depth feels different. It does not constantly threaten your sense of self. It does not make you feel as though you must earn basic emotional safety through performance or sacrifice. And on their side, something equally powerful is unfolding beneath the surface. At first, most people try to manage this by compartmentalizing. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They tell themselves the feelings are temporary, impractical, inconvenient, or unrealistic. They attempt to return to the emotional structure that existed before the connection became undeniable. But once something reaches a certain level of emotional recognition, returning to unconsciousness becomes extremely difficult. Because the mind can deny things for a while, but the body keeps records of what feels alive. Quiet moments become harder for them now. The distractions that once worked begin losing their effectiveness. The routines feel flatter. The conversations that once seemed sufficient no longer fully satisfy them. They may continue functioning normally on the outside, but internally there is growing awareness that something real has interrupted the emotional autopilot they were living inside. And that awareness changes people slowly from the inside out. What makes this especially difficult is that they are likely realizing how much of their identity has been built around control, predictability, or emotional self-protection. Many people spend years learning how to avoid vulnerability without even recognizing they are doing it. They become highly functional, highly rational, highly composed. They know how to maintain appearances. They know how to keep moving. But they do not necessarily know how to fully inhabit their emotional truth without fear. Then a connection arrives that bypasses all the usual defenses. Not because it is magical or perfect, but because it reaches something authentic beneath the layers of performance and conditioning. And once that happens, the gap between the life they are maintaining and the life they actually feel connected to becomes increasingly impossible to ignore. That is the pressure building now. Not external pressure from you demanding answers, but internal pressure created by emotional honesty itself. Because eventually, every person reaches a moment where they must confront the difference between what feels safe and what feels alive. And those are not always the same thing. That is why you do not need to force movement out of fear that nothing is happening. Internal transformation rarely looks dramatic while it is occurring. Most meaningful change happens invisibly for a long time before it becomes visible externally. Seeds break open underground long before anything appears above the surface. Human beings are not very different in that regard. This is also why rushing toward closure or demanding certainty too early can sometimes interrupt processes that are still unfolding naturally. There is a difference between honoring your self-respect and forcing an outcome because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Right now, your task is not to chase resolution out of panic. Your task is to remain connected to yourself while reality continues revealing what this connection actually is. The intensity you feel does not necessarily mean time is running out. People often mistake emotional activation for urgency, but intensity simply means your awareness is fully engaged. You are awake to the significance of what you are experiencing. And awakening can feel overwhelming because it removes the numbness that previously kept everything muted and manageable. But being awake does not mean you must immediately control the outcome. In fact, some of the most powerful transformations occur when you stop trying to force life into immediate resolution and instead allow clarity to emerge gradually through observation, grounding, and self-trust. That does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming stable. There is enormous power in learning how to stay emotionally present without collapsing into impulsive action every time uncertainty appears. Most people have never learned this skill. The moment discomfort arises, they rush to fix, secure, define, chase, explain, or escape. But emotional maturity often looks like remaining connected to yourself even while outcomes are still incomplete. That changes your energy completely. Because when you stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of reassurance, you begin interacting with relationships from a place of wholeness instead of emotional survival. Your worth stops depending entirely on another person's immediate clarity or responsiveness. You stop interpreting every delay as rejection or every silence as proof that you are unlovable. You understand that love cannot thrive where self-abandonment is required. You understand that emotional depth is not weakness. You understand that confusion is not the highest form of passion. You understand that real connection should move you closer to yourself, not further away from yourself. Those realizations become part of your foundation now. And foundations matter because they determine what kinds of relationships you are capable of sustaining in the future. So continue allowing yourself to soften without collapsing. Continue learning how to care deeply without losing your center. Continue trusting what repeated patterns reveal instead of becoming hypnotized by temporary emotional intensity, because the life that is truly aligned for you will not require you to disappear in order to receive it. And the people who are genuinely meant to walk beside you will feel relief, not resistance, in the presence of your authenticity. They will not need to be convinced to move closer to the real you. They will recognize it naturally. And that is worth remembering every single time you are tempted to shrink yourself just to keep someone emotionally comfortable.